The Greatness and Decadence of Gluttony. Essay about the downfall of one of the deadly sins. Laureano Gómez. Translated by Narco-Republican.
Gluttony, or the inordinate appetite for eating and drinking, according to the definition of the Catechism, has occupied its malefic category as fifth of the deadly sins, which torment and darken the life of men, with an efficacy that did not yield to that of its malefic brothers. In 5 ways, according to St. Thomas, it dominated its adepts, which the memorist masters of the schools reduced to a Latin verse.
Pre-prepare, Lord, Nimis, Ardenter, Studios.
In accordance to whether the vicious disorder was in the time, in the quality, in the quantity, in the manner or in the seasoning of the viands, for the vice of gluttony, according to the same saint, consists in the disorder of concupiscence, which leads astray and disarranges the consideration of the ends. Friar Louis of Granada considers gluttony as the gateway to all the other vices, and nourishment and bait for the other sins, for which reason the devil first tempted our Saviour with gluttony. A vice so deserving of punishment, according to the classic,
that the rich glutton, clothed in purple and scarlet, was cast into hell. For hunger and fullness, delight and continence cannot be bid the same farewell, but in death, misery follows delight, and delight follows misery.
Known is the prevalence of this sin in the ancient times, as Plutarch tells of Lucullus, 40 and 41, and Suetonius Tranquillus of Caligula, 37, of Claudius, 33, of Nero, 27, of whom he refers that one of his acquaintances gave him a banquet in which a delicacy, prepared with honey, cost no less than 4,000,000 sesterces, and in another one even more for a rose drink. Of Vitellius says Suetonius, 13, that on the day of his entry into Rome his brother gave him a banquet at which 2,000 of the most exquisite fish and 7,000 birds were served. His ordinary feasts cost no less than 400,000 sesterces each. He crowned his profusion with the premiere of a dish of enormous proportions, which he lavishly called the Shield of Minerva Protectress, in which were mixed livers of sculpin, brains of pheasants, tongues of flamingos and roe of lampreys, for all of which ships had been sent from the country of the Parthians to the Sea of Spain. Petronius in his Satyricon describes the enormities of Trimalchio's dinner, and of the excesses of the same vice speaks Tacitus in many places in the Annals. In that age gluttony played a notorious role among the pleiad of its rivals. But it is not necessary to go back to times before the present era to find it triumphant. Maeterlinck in his Mona Vanna and Merezkovsky in the Resurrection of the Gods, when he describes a stupendous banquet served by Ludovico the Moor, present astonishing reconstructions of the influx of this sin in the times of the Renaissance. There are no novelist's exaggerations, nor amplifications dictated by the artistic fantasy of the writers. The historical documents have less amenity, but in their naked rawness are more impressive than the accounts of the Belgian or Russian novelist. A historian of such great authority as Pastor, reports that Sixtus IV had occupied the papal throne only for a few months when he called to the Senate of the Church 2 of his young nephews, Giuliano della Rovere and Pietro Riario. The former was not more than 28 years old, and the latter not more than 25. Both belonged to the Franciscan order and were made cardinals, the first with the title of Saint Peter ad Vincula and the second with that of Saint Sixtus. Giuliano, addicted to serious and classical studies, would become the great Pontiff Julius II. Pietro Riario was of a different character, according to Pastor, utterly unworthy of the cardinal's purple. The 2 nephews consented to incur with them in the lack of accumulation of benefits. The elder was simultaneously Bishop of Avignon, Coutances, Carpentras, Mende, Viviers, Bologna, and enjoyed numerous abbeys and many other benefices, of whose obligations and burdens never took great notice, but at least he made good use of the greater part of his enormous revenues. Riario, the younger, was still more munificently favored by his uncle, the pontiff, with copious prebends, for he accrued the archbishopric of Florence, which shortly before had been administered by a saint, the patriarchate of Constantinople, the bishoprics of Spalato, Seville, and Valencia, and numerous abbeys, so that his annual revenues soon exceeded 60,000 gold ducats. These very large sums were insufficient for his pride, his desire to command, his boundless ambition and his unheard-of propensity for luxury. The poor Franciscan friar, suddenly converted into an opulent Croesus, gave himself up to the most senseless prodigality.
The cardinal, says Platina, set himself to collect together unheard-of quantities of gold and silver plate, costly raiment, hangings and carpets, splendid horses, and a multitude of servants in scarlet and silk. He patronized young poets and painters, and delighted in contriving and carrying out pageants and tournaments on the most magnificent scale. He seemed to vie with the ancients in pomp and grandeur.
So much for Platina's quotation. And Pastor, with support in the Chronicles of Viterbo by Giovanni di Giuzzo, adds.
And, it may be added, in vices. All morality was openly defied by this upstart. Instead of the habit of Saint Francis, he went about in garments laden with gold, and adorned his mistress from head to foot with costly pearls.
When in 1473 the wedding of Ercole d'Este with Eleonora d'Aragon, daughter of the King of Naples, took place in Rome, among other opulent celebrations, this Pietro Riario, Cardinal of San Sixtus, gave a banquet, described by the chronicler Bernardino Corio in terms that could be considered untrue if other witnesses did not confirm his account. He relates that at the end of the banqueting hall there was a sideboard with 12 aperns, loaded with a magnificent gold and silver tableware, with precious stones in such quantity that they formed an admirable sight, and only to that use dedicated, because it was amazing that being so many meals, as will be seen, and changing the silver service for each one, it was not necessary to move anything from that sideboard. The tables were two, the first of 7 persons at which sat the most dignified Duchess and on her right the Cardinal of San Sixtus, the Duke of Andria and Count Girolamo, on her left, the illustrious Signor Sigismund, the Duchess of Amalfi and the illustrious Messer Alberto. At the other table were placed the remaining guests in limited number. Before being seated, they were served a snack of sweetmeats, oranges encrusted with sugar, and malvoisie, and then rose water for their hands. The tables had 4 tablecloths on top of each other, which were removed at certain intervals to begin the service for certain viands. Contemporary imagination is unable to comprehend what were those parties that seem to have been imagined and arranged for beings of a species different to the human one. See the extract from the Chronicle of Corio on what happened as soon as the distinguished diners were ready to commence the banquet. The seats were decorated, according to custom, with golden bread. The first service was of pignonade with the arms of the guests, all gilded, and golden manuscripts in golden cups. Then came livers of capons and goatlings, cold cuts in bowls with white wine, blancmange with sweet orange pips. This served, then followed 2 capons in green sauce with Corsican wine, 1 chick per person with exquisite violet sauce, all kinds of cakes, poultry pies, 2 whole calves without the skin, 5 pieces of veal for each plate, 5 of mutton, 3 of wild boar, 3 whole goatlings, 6 chickens, 6 capons, 2 sausages for each plate, calves' heads in the shape of unicorns, with gravy on the head, pumpkin stew, chicken pies. The story of Atalanta, of Hippomenes, and of Perseus when he freed Andromeda, all in viands. Then came roasted meat on large plates, namely, 5 pieces of veal, 3 whole goatlings, 2 whole hares, for each plate 10 squabs, 10 chickens, 4 rabbits, a peacock with its feathers and behind Orpheus with the zither, followed by 4 peacocks also unplucked, with their tails high and open, and a female with her little ones, in the same state. 2 pheasants, 2 storks and 2 cranes with feathers. A deer with the skin and with its horns, a bear in the same way and with a staff in its mouth, a fallow deer, a goatling, wild boars and many other animals, all cooked, with the skin and hair, in their natural size, so that they seemed alive, and they were placed on the tables representing a mountain. Galantine in large silver shells, covered all around, and in the middle a unicorn with a straight horn. Finally, 5 golden meat pies and muscatel pears in cups were served. With this the first tablecloths were removed and the other things were taken away, while bowls of water were passed around for the hands, adorned with cedar flowers. Upon the second tablecloths, the tables were prepared with silvered bread and silvered syrup. Lemons were served in cups, roasted fish, seasoned with yellow sauce, cakes of silvered eels with various sauces, 2 whole sturgeons cooked in silver plates and carried in silver grills, 6 plates of lampreys in golden grills, where Ceres was seen in a golden chariot, pulled by 2 tigers, with a lighted torch, silver jelly in large platters, silver green cakes and cottage cheese in large plates. The next tablecloth having been lifted, scented water was given for the hands. The tables were arranged with loaves of bread filled with flowers and served with pine nuts in the shape of diamonds, cherries in cups with wine from Tyro, chickens a la Catalana, sour cherries in cups, exquisite green delicacy, with carnations and rosemary, large roast in large dishes, 5 pieces of veal, 3 pieces of mutton per plate, 3 pieces of goatling, 3 whole piglets, 4 capons and 8 goslings. In the meantime many garnished delicacies were brought to the tables, which were more of a decorative display than a gastronomic supply, like the previous ones. For in various viands and confectionaries were presented the works of Hercules in defeating the lion, the boar and the bull, all life-size, with candy towers and castles. There was also a life-size serpent, a vianda of wild men, 10 large ships with sails and ropes all made of candy and filled with sugar acorns, Venus dragged by 2 swans, cottage cheese in the shape of children and many other mythological and artistic fantasies. Once the last tablecloth was removed, water was brought for the hands and wine, fluffy cakes, wafers, fresh and clean almonds, candy sprinkles, aniseed, cinnamon and other trifles. The same chronicler describes the banquet given to celebrate the wedding of Violante, daughter of Galeazzo II Visconti, with Lionel of Antwerp. It is a description very similar to the one transcribed above, in which 18 dishes are listed, no less abundant, fantastic and overwhelming for a contemporary appetite. Another Renaissance chronicler, Friar Pablo Marighi, describes the banquet given by Marshal John Giacomo Trivulzio when he married Beatrice di Avalos di Aquino, of the royal blood of Aragon. The stupendous menu was as follows. First, rose water was served for the hands, then paste of pine nuts and sugar, with loaves made of almonds and sugar resembling marzipan and other very delicate and very expensive things, mixed with gold. Next, excellent asparagus of great size, which attracted attention because it was not the time for them. Third, breasts with seasoned livers. Fourth, roasted partridge meat with various sauces. As can be seen from the accounts, during the Renaissance, gluttony, in gastronomic apogee, knew how to cover itself with the sumptuous claims of the art and the magnificence of extreme luxury. But its inevitable decline had already begun. It would not abandon the field without a struggle, and as the conditions of modern life deprived it of the support of easy and abundant incomes, it took refuge, in order not to die, in the field of exquisiteness. The culinary art received outstanding social status and even the decisive and compelling support of the modern state. Napoleon, after the Peace of Pressburg, in that almost unique year of tranquility that he enjoyed, before the Battle of Jena, while he founded the Imperial University and promulgated the Civil Code, which has perpetuated his name in the most noble field of jurisprudence, created the Maison d'Education in Écouen, for the daughters of the members of the Légion d'honneur, with the primordial warning that the art of cooking be given the utmost importance, so that these young women, being useful women, could always be pleasant women. With this, the emperor did nothing but fight for the continuation of an authentic French tradition of refinement in the pleasures of the table. One can estimate the comfort of this tradition with a quote from the will of the Marquis de la Girardière, which Tancred de Vizin includes in his book Watching the Cows Go By, and it goes like this.
I bequeath to my godson my edition of the Physiology of Taste, in 2 volumes, so that in Brillat-Savarin's immortal work he may find an extract honor, wisdom, grace and the true science of life. In return, I only ask my nephew to celebrate my memory, each year, by eating by himself, between the 25th of November and the 15th of December, a woodcock from the country, without truffles, because their perfume would absorb that of the bird, and without bacon because the slices placed on the meat would impair the even and regular cooking. It is well understood that this woodcock will be browned on the spit. The fallen hunks of the bird during its roasting will be received on canapés cushioned with fresh butter, with the head concealed by a napkin, so that no scent will escape to the outside and so that the smoke of the game, combined with the perfume of pomade, chambertin or close vougeot, of which there will be a large glass placed next to the plate, will more directly affect his nose. My nephew will savor this sacred delicacy, alone, in the seclusion of the night, and he will consume this gastronomic sacrifice in commemoration of me.
But the decadence of gluttony accentuated its deadly rhythm. Its efforts to survive were in vain, to such a degree that shortly before the previous war a famous club was founded in Paris, the Club de Cent, which achieved enormous celebrity. These last survivors of the great old vice could not sit at Cardinal Rierio's table, because there were no more lavish and opulent cardinals to serve feasts, not even close to those described by Bernardino Corio. They had to make do with meticulous and personal research to discover in which corner of the Parisian streets or in which modest provincial inn there was one to be found who still had an unheard of dexterity of hand for mousseline sauce, or for preparing mountain trout in Burgundy sauce, roast duck or chicken à la Périgord. It was a desperate search to find out where they cooked snails with onion sauce, or big game cooked over aromatic wood fire. And such a chase for a single main course, with languid garnishes before and after. And a single wine, or at most two, accompanied by strong liquors, usually counterfeited. What decadence! The club had great success, because French cuisine, that true national glory, was in danger. Its succulent traditions were being lost more and more. Everything concurred to precipitate its ruin, the haste of modern life that rejects the delicacy for refined food and selected wines, and the disastrous progress of science that came with its conserves, its concentrated products, its artificial foods, and with all the impostures and superciliousness of the table and the growing loss of taste and joy of living. There were but 100 paladins, and their secrets were exchanged with more love and zeal than the Egyptian priests had for their own. Something was dying. Of such decadence it is not even 3 decades yet. But now, the European people live on sugar rations of 300 grams a month, a portion of meat twice a week and an egg once a fortnight. The rest is made up for with potatoes, or dried vegetables, canned food, substitutes of all kinds. From the king and the prime minister down to the last citizen, they have to make do with a subsistence ration, just enough so that the machine of life does not stop, like a car is provided with gasoline so that it can run. It is about something else. Gluttony is dead.